ask a lot of questions, but I don't give answers. And not only because I don't want to give answers, I don't know what's the right answer for you. Part of the things that we work in therapy is really bringing to consciousness what is unconscious. If we don't become conscious of our own problem, we keep projecting it on others. It can be our friends, it can be in the the relationship with our partner. But what's your role in it? In every relationship we have a role, when there is a conflict. I also find it's more challenging for my male clients. With the social media, a lot of people again look outside, a lot of our teens are constantly comparing themselves. And they don't see the reality of people's life. Women, they talk about their feelings with their friends, with their family, they're more expressive. But men, they hide their emotions a lot. Yes, they do live somehow in a lonely island.
Maybe can we go a little bit more in depth about that early life versus kind of later life that you talked about? So how do you go into that later part of life, obviously becoming a bit more fulfilled and finding that meaning to your life? Can you maybe explain a little bit more about that path and that development that someone has to work on?
Yes, it's about really connecting inside. And, when I sit with the client, the answers are not in me. Sometimes a lot of clients come and ask me, so what should I do? And I said, I don't know. And a lot of clients, they don't like it, because I think a part of it is really finding your own personal authority. If you've been told all the time what to do and you come to therapy and I also tell you what to do, so what's the difference? Your power, your sense of knowing stay very unconscious. And we really want to bring that to the consciousness. So we sit with each other, I ask questions. I ask a lot of questions, but I don't give answers. And not only because I don't want to give answers, I don't know what's the right answer for you. And what's the right answer for you today might not be the right answer for you tomorrow. So every answers also come with a responsibility. We have to make choices. And when we sit and really connect to ourselves, we come to a place of, do I really want to choose this path or that path? And can I be responsible for my
choices?
Yes.
So it's basically talking about taking responsibility for yourself, for
and
your individual
finding
self.
your personal authority in life.
What does that mean, personal authority?
It means that I choose for myself again. And I have that personal authority to choose what's right and what's wrong. And again, today I may choose one thing that makes sense for me and tomorrow may be something else. But I'm responsible for the outcome.
I see. Now, one of the things I think that comes with a lot of this midlife crisis and depression, and I guess it kind of relates to taking responsibility for yourself as well, is when it affects your relationship. Because I see so commonly around me, and I think it's very common, especially in this day in society, that you see a lot of relationship issues happen in late 30s, mid 40s, early 50s. Could that be related to this sense of not knowing the individual self and not necessarily taking responsibility for it?
Yes, and part of the things that we work in therapy is really bringing to consciousness what is unconscious. If we don't become conscious of our own problem, we keep projecting it on others. It can be our friends, it can be in the relationship with our partner, So it is very important. Part of the work of therapy is really helping us to reclaim different part of ourselves, to be whole, to bring the unconscious material more into to the consciousness and integrate it to the consciousness. And if we don't do that, we really keep projecting it
onto others, which could be a relationship or people that are close to you.
Yes. And sometimes, couples come and they really look into, okay, can you change my partner? They don't want to take the responsibility of their own actions. They want someone else's fix their partner. But what's your role in it? In every relationship, we have a role, when there is a conflict.
So
And
every person has a role. Every
every
person has an
person has a
individual
role.
responsibility.
And if we don't bring to consciousness, a lot of, our stuff, we keep projecting it. And we look for a partner to carry our unconscious materials. We
Carry the
really,
load.
yes. So if, for example, you are, you don't really have that personal authority, your power stays very unconscious. You look for, you project a lot on a very powerful partner, but you give all the power to that partner. And I used to work with women in domestic violence. They were very nice, a lot of them,
Yeah.
but the sense of assertiveness wasn't there for them. So they brought some of, those partners into their life. They were very, not only assertive, a little bit abusive. And they keep changing the partners, not knowing that something in them needs to change. And when we work together and really, I help them to found their voice and that side of, we call it, their assertiveness was in their shadow side. They were very unconscious about it. And then when they became more assertive, then they start to have different choice of the partners. What we don't work on ourselves, Jung believed if we don't integrate, Jung said we don't need to be good. We want to be whole and complete. And if we don't work on ourselves and we don't bring our unconscious material to consciousness, we bring people into our life to leave those parts for us.
I see.
And we're repeating those until
patterns. So the patterns are going to develop.
Until we really get the message that.
So each individual in the relationship is equally responsible for his or herself to be able to not only improve like oneself, but to be able to, through that process, be able to have a more fulfilling relationship.
Yes, because if we go with we all have our own wounds and brokenness and traumas, but if we want our partner to carry us through life, it becomes too much for our partner. We really need to do our work. I become responsible for my own problem, and my partner becomes responsible and
for their own problem.
Yes, he can do his work. So we walk together, we grow together.
In parallel.
In parallel.
Okay. So a lot of, I think, issues come up when one partner recognizes that and wants to do therapy, but the other person doesn't want to do therapy or doesn't recognize that. So that's quite challenging. And so
that's very challenging.
I'm sure that's quite common in your practice and you see. And so how do you go about that? How do you help those couples and individuals, kind of tackle this relationship issue?
I learned through my practice, you cannot help someone who doesn't seek help. When partners, when couples come to therapy, they really both need to understand that they have to put work into our work together, and take the responsibilities. They have to be open towards, okay, what needs to be done from my side, and the other person can take care of it. But if there is resistance, it's really hard to work.
It's very difficult because
very difficult
I can imagine there's a lot of cases where one person, wants to do the therapy, they're doing couples therapy, but one is just basically just showing up because they have to show up, right?
Yeah, so, in those cases, I find it's very hard to work with the couples. And I suggest, if I have a couple like that, I suggest personal, individual therapy for the person that is willing to work, because it's not going to work if a person is very resistant,
So do you find that there's a difference between some of the apprehensions or maybe taboos or differences culturally when it comes to seeking help and therapy, men, women? Do you find that's the case?
Yes, I find different cultures have different way of really, looking at mental health and seeking help in therapy. For example, in our culture, Persian cultures, there are a lot of, now it's much more open, but before people didn't,
a lot of stigma.
Around, what's wrong with me. And now you know that there is nothing wrong with you. Do you want to, become a more conscious, more aware person? know more about your stuck places, your old patterns that keep you stuck in life,
Yeah.
or you wanted to stay unconscious. And when they look at therapy as a, way of growth and to become
Yeah.
who they can become, that's a difference. So awareness and consciousness is growing, but I also find it's more challenging for my male clients.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, to kind of
Yes, yes.
we'll come back to that in a moment. I actually do have a question about that. But so what do you recommend people when there's so much resistance sometimes to therapy and seeking help until it's very late? Because I can imagine that many of the clients or patients that you see, it's when they really need help or they've kind of hit a wall versus people that are quite actively trying to not to get to that end level and seek help and therapy before. What is your message and how do you know, become more aware of when problems are there and you need to get therapy? That's I think that's kind of like the magic question. How do you know when you go see a therapist?
Well, I would say most of my, I can't say most, but I would say 60% of my clients, they seek help when they hit the wall.
So
So
more than 50%, you would say.
yes,
Yeah.
more than
Yeah.
50%. They come in a places that are really stuck in life. What
Yeah.
was working before
Yeah.
is not working anymore. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But other clients, they come because they're more aware of the benefits of the therapy. They're more, curious about how can I become a more authentic person. I think a big part of therapy is really helping people to find who they really are, because a lot of us, we don't know who we really are. And not only to help them to find it, and also find the courage to live it. That's the most important part, because
Yeah.
sometimes we recognize, okay, I know who I am, but I have difficulty because I've been like this for so many years. Now it's
Now
difficult,
I got to face some
So finding that
truthful
courage
facts.
is a
Yeah.
big part of it. But those people who come for personal growth, I think also, come and explore. They explore, their unconscious, the shadow. We work with dreams, we work with symbolism, and they come to a better understanding of who they really are and what they want to do with their life.
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting usage of word that you use or language that you use of growth, of being able to, from if you look at it from that perspective and improving oneself, yourself, then maybe it's not as scary or as difficult to take that step. And I think the way I look at it sometimes, because I've certainly gotten therapy as well over the years, here and there, is that sometimes how you might go see a chiropractor like myself to fix a shoulder issue. There's some physical issue that needs to be checked, and we always recommend, hey, before it really gets bad, we can't even use it. Recognize where it's necessary to get therapy sooner, right? So I think if you even look at the mind and the psyche like that as well, right? Is that okay? Sometimes not only does it need help, but before that, in terms of growth, I think everyone can benefit from seeking therapy and help and improving themselves, right? So I think that's maybe a more easier way to approach it. I don't know. That's how at least what I tell my
Yeah,
patients.
a lot of time, some of my clients come to therapy, because of their trauma. When we work on their trauma, they come to a place that we call it post-traumatic growth. That they can, we
Yeah.
cannot erase the trauma of our clients. The trauma always stays in the past, but the relationship to that can change. And also,
Oh, the way you look at
can
it.
be, you
Yeah,
can
yeah,
become very powerful, and you can use,
yeah.
what was at some point, was the source of your, vulnerability as a source of your growth, and you can use it in that way as well.
So, on a positive note, I think from your conversation, I learned that that stigma and some of these barriers that are culturally there or mentally or, from society's perspective or people's individual barriers, that it's becoming better and better. People are seeking more help and they're not necessarily look at it as looking at as a barrier. So would you confirm that that's a
I
more
would say
positive
yes, it's becoming better, and people
okay
are, seeking help.
utilizing it more?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
You touched base on a little bit about social media and younger generation kids and young adults. And I know we talked a lot about that midlife crisis, mid 30s to mid 40s. But I think there is, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like there's increased prevalence of anxiety and depression with teenagers and kids nowadays. And I know part of the problem, a lot of scientists are saying maybe it's due to social media, obviously pressures of life and society as well. Can you maybe comment a little bit about that and what your findings have been and what you see kind of developing and growing?
Well, yeah, I think with the social media, a lot of people again look outside. A lot of our teams are constantly comparing themselves,
Yeah.
and they don't see the reality of people's life. They just see a snapshot of it and they think, oh, look at everyone is happy, I'm not. And adolescence is the time of transformation. They are, transforming their body, their mind, their
Yeah.
psyche from the childhood to the adulthood. And we don't have that much of initiation in those period of time, and kids are feeling lost. They look outside, they don't know what to do with themselves, with their feelings and emotions. A lot of comparison, a lot of,
Judgment. Yeah.
judgments. And yes, I would say that puts a lot of, negative impact on young adults. And
Yeah, especially with the social media, all uh, these accounts that always showing, wealthy life and being happy and being the most super
yes.
fit and having the nicest sized body and features and all these friends and vacations. I think that, as you say, you're always looking on the outside instead of on you. So
Really connecting,
yeah, so
yes,
much
yes.
earlier in life, you're looking at the outside. And so, are you kind of worried for the next generation with all the social media? That's a personal question.
Well, it's a challenge. I
Yeah.
think it's not going to be easy, but I think informing the young kids and, teenagers to really be able to connect to themselves, to talk to their parents, to have a strong, connection,
Yeah.
emotional connection to your kids, to letting them know that what you see is not the reality of people's life, because they're struggling internally and they look outside again, as you said, they see a snapshot, they see a picture of someone's
Yeah.
life and they think that's the whole reality,
That's the whole reality.
and
Yeah.
it's all about the persona. People, cover themselves. We don't put our vulnerable moment in social media.
Of course.
We just put,
99% of it is a good,
yes,
amazing,
yes,
happy,
exactly.
with
So
exaggeration.
informing them,
Yeah.
giving them more information about what you see is not the reality, and helping them, initiating them to the adulthood can help them, hopefully.
Yeah, hopefully. It's a very challenging kind of issue, I think, because, this stuff's changing so quickly and, social media and, the way these things are, with technology is quite fast and rapid, right? But hopefully, parents can, inform their children a little bit more and hopefully we come through some of this stuff. You talked a little bit about men versus women and men uh, seeking maybe or form a smaller percentage of your patients, I think you said in your earlier statement.
I would say yes, probably 40% of my clients,
40%.
30 to 40% are male clients, and the majority of
Majority
them
of
are,
are women.
yes.
Why do you think women seek more help than men?
Women's are more in touch with their feelings,
Okay.
and for men, it's very hard. When they come, and sometimes I ask the question, how do you feel? They pause. Not only
Yeah.
men, I would say women too,
Women
but
too, yeah.
mostly men, it's hard for them,
Connect with their
to connect
emotions.
with their emotions and feelings and
Okay.
express them. And we look in the, society that they look at men as either you're very, successful or you're a failure. And sometimes when they have difficulty, it's hard for them to look for help. They look at it as a failure, I don't want to fail. I hide my emotions. And usually they're not that much in touch with their emotions, But
Do you think that's something that comes from like early in life as being boys and not being taught this, or culturally society's expectation of them
I think all of the above.
above?
All of the above, yes. They sometimes says men don't cry. What does that message? Like, why? Don't they have
I've heard that from
emotions?
childhood. Yeah, almost everyone,
Yes.
especially men around you, and women, like, oh, boys don't cry, don't, be a man,
Yeah. So you learn from very early
Yeah.
on not to be in touch, to hide it, not to show your vulnerability. The message is there is something wrong with you, why are you crying? So you learn that, okay, I cannot express. So you push them down, but they don't go away. They become repressed and repressed. And if we don't work on them, they may come
Eventually
up and
come out.
eventually, yeah.
So I guess these one of the main like barriers I guess that men face would be that sense of, I guess, quote unquote weakness on, like, my manhood is in question, right? Where your sense of masculinity, right? And so how do we overcome that with the next generation? How do we help the next generation of boys and men being able to seek help and therapy and be more in tune with their emotions?
Well, bringing more consciousness into this subject, talk about it, that it's good to talk about, to explore our feelings. There's nothing wrong with talking about, our feelings and expressing them and really processing them, because if we don't process them, they stay very unconscious. And again, if they stay very unconscious, sometimes, in some occasions when our ego strength is less, they can come out and possess us, or they can come like depression, So it is very important to be in touch with our emotions, to be able to process them.
And so I guess probably a lot of education would need to come from parents of the current generation with their boys and obviously girls, but specifically in boys of being, hey, like teaching them that it is good, it is okay to show emotions and sometimes vulnerability, and it doesn't always have to be about strength and being successful.
We don't associate that with the sign of weakness, of course. Yes.
Yeah, I think one of our conversations that we had one time over coffee was that you were talking about, I think you used the words lonely island for men. Can you tell our viewers what that means? And I think you use this specifically when men come seek therapy.
Yeah, for example, women, they talk about their feelings with their friends, with their family. They're more expressive. But men's, they hide their emotions a lot. Yes, they do live somehow in a lonely island. So when
They're
they
kind of
come,
like by themselves.
yes, and a lot of them are even repressed. They don't know about their own feelings themselves as well. So, and so it's challenging for them to come and talk to someone about their feelings, the depth of their emotions. And I guess, but it's very important for them to understand that we all have emotions and feelings. And, if we don't work on them, they get stuck in us and they prevent us from, moving forward.
That's right. So I think there's a increase, maybe correct me if I'm wrong, increased prevalence of men seeking more help and therapy as well. I know, myself, and I know so many more of my friends are now looking at that. So whereas if I was like 10 years ago, some of my friends were like, oh, therapy,
I don't want it.
I don't want it, or I don't need help. I'm okay. I'll deal with it myself, right? So that's a good positive thing that, some of these barriers are being broken, some of these stigmas around, being masculine or being strong or this or that. Now, in terms of your work, obviously you see a lot of very interesting cases, and there's a lot of cool stories that you have. But can you tell me a little bit more about maybe the gratification that you have? And you said earlier, I think the first few sentences that you said about your profession was that you love your job and you love what you're doing. So can you maybe tell us a little bit of the gratification side of things?
Of course. I think a big part of my work is really helping people to find who they really are.
Yeah.
And really overcoming the challenge of, the conditioning of the past. Sometimes we get stuck in life. We don't know how to move forward, to help them okay, what are the old patterns here? What are you responding to that is not working for you? How can you expand your capacity to hold whatever is uncomfortable? How can you, look at life from a broader perspective, not very narrow, When we are, a lot of time we get stuck in life from one way of looking at life, one way of dealing with problems, But there's so much possibilities out there.
Yeah.
And Jung had a sentence that I really like. He said, sometimes we walk into shoes too small for us. And that's about,
I've always heard the reverse, where you feeling the shoes are too big for you, right?
No, he said sometimes we walk into shoes too small for us, that
Interesting.
there's so much possibilities, but we're not aware of them. We have some old patterns that, the past is too much present into our life, and we become very one-sided, how we can expand our capacity to see different possibilities in life. That's very rewarding, to help people to really have a better understanding of themselves and finally find the courage to live who they really are. That's very rewarding.
Rewarding for you.
Yes.
That's
and
fantastic,
again, working even with depression, sometimes people ask me, isn't it hard for you to, work with depression? And I said, most of the time I look at it as a sign of the soul and where the individual is stuck and how I can help that individual to really, become more authentic and find what's there for that individual to live that is unexpressed.
Absolutely. Now, reverse of that, what are some of the challenges you face? Stressful things about your profession and your job. Obviously, I think in the healthcare profession, you sometimes are a sponge. You bring all the, problems home, and not necessarily home, but you always have to be, strong and have positive energy. And so obviously that can be very difficult sometimes. But in your line of work specifically, dealing with so much trauma and stress all the time, what are some of the challenges?
Well, yes, it can be difficult. There are times that it can be difficult, but again, I love what I do and I always enjoy what I do.
Yeah.
And that's why I look at it as a way of, okay, how can I help that person? And the challenge for me is that, I have my own personal life. I have 2 young kids, and then I have family, everything around me,
Yeah.
and there are times that I'm not at my best, so I have to really work on myself to be in a regulated place when I sit with my clients. So I have to meditate, I have to go to nature, I have to do my yoga, because if I don't work on myself when I sit, it's not fair for my clients. So that's a challenge, that there are times that life is difficult and you really have to work harder on yourself to be able to be available for your client.
And of course, I think one of the stereotypes is that, if you're a therapist and, you have all the tools to be able to take care of everything, everything must be happy and dandy and perfect. But you're a human being as well.
You're
and
a human
I think
being.
you have your ups and downs.
You have your own life, and then
Yeah, and even therapists can, seek therapy as well, right? There's nothing wrong with that.
no,
I think.
there's nothing
Nothing
wrong.
wrong with that,
Actually,
yeah.
it's very important
Important.
for therapists
Absolutely.
to seek for help. To have their own analysis, because again, if they don't work on themselves, the unresolved issue can get stuck in their relationship with their clients.
Well, that's fantastic. So I guess having tools to be able to manage your own stress, to be able to face the challenges of your job, but at the same time create such a satisfactory and gratifying kind of sense of belonging of what you do and what you love to do. Now, one final, I guess, comment is that if someone was to ask you, what is the point of therapy? What would you say?
I would say to bring more integration in
Yeah.
your psyche, to bring what is unconscious more to consciousness for your personal growth, for having a better and fuller life, to become who you really need to become. Yes.
Perfect. Well, that's a fantastic way to end the show. Shirin, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you, Suresh, for
Appreciate it.
having me.
Thank you.